Welcome to the Film Florida podcast. I'm John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Before we get to our interview, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the Film Florida podcast. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. If you like what you hear on the podcast, please consider going to our website and donating $20.22 for our 2022 fundraising campaign. We also have a Film Florida merchandise page. Visit filmflorida.creator-spring.com to purchase Film Florida t-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, and more. Scott Edwards is the Executive VP, Head of Creative Advertising for Fox Entertainment, where he produces trailers, launch promos, one-sheets, billboards, custom digital and social content for some of the most recognizable titles on television. We talk about a typical day in his role, how he got to this point in his career, and much more. Here's my conversation with Scott Edwards. Welcome to the Film Florida podcast, Scott.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So before we go through your career, I want to give people a little bit of context. Your current title is Executive Vice President, Fox Creative Advertising. So what exactly is creative advertising and what do you do?
In the entertainment industry, there is the team that puts together, oversees the marketing materials for entertainment content. So it's entertainment marketing, which is the bigger umbrella. But underneath that sits creative advertising, which is the team or teams that put together on-air promos, trailers, posters, billboards, social assets that go on social handles, websites, Twitter, TikTok, things like that. So I oversee a team of roughly 100, and they are responsible for generating what would be the consumer-facing representations of our creative content. So if something makes someone want to tune in and watch a show, which is what it's supposed to do, there's a good chance my department had something to do with making that thing. Right?
Excellent. Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so now that we have a little bit of understanding of what your current role, let's kind of go backwards. I like to start most of the interviews with an origin story. So tell our audience where you came from.
While born in Northern California, I really am an Indiana kid. I grew up there at such a young age. It is really my home. My mom still lives there. And for whatever reason, I paid attention to advertising and I loved movies and I loved music. And so I found myself editing together songs to make a new song. It's my first version of editing that I can recall. And that's going to come in handy way later. I loved movies. I grew up going to the theater, loving movies, more so than television, actually. The fact that I work in television is a bit of an anomaly, and I'll get to that. But I grew up loving movies, loving music, and I had an editorial sensibility. I wasn't aware it was an editorial sensibility, but it was happening. So then when I got out of undergraduate, which was Indiana University, where I was a theater and telecommunications double major, and those have come in very handy because I understand the production side of television. I understand the performance side of television, having a theater degree and really working hard in the performance area and directing actors. And then I worked for a couple of years in Indiana, and it wasn't for me the job I had. I worked at a radio station selling airtime and doing the creative. And I found that I hated selling the airtime, but I sure loved putting together the spots that went on the air. So I appreciate what you will go through putting something like this together. And I applied to any number of film schools, and most of them said, no, thank you. You can go back to your origin story of Indiana. And one of them said, we'll take a risk on you. And that was in Pasadena, Art Center College of Design. And I was accepted there and went in and got into the graduate program and loved every minute of it. And while I tried my hand at directing commercials, thinking I'll do commercial directing, I was really proficient at editing. And it turns out my director's reel, which was also my editor's reel, got me more recognition as an editor. So I got a job at a trailer house cutting trailers. Now that's movie trailers. When they say trailers, they're referring to movie trailers. And usually you go in there and you get an assistant edit job or an assistant job or a junior job. But I had a strong enough editing reel that I was able to get an editor's position or freelance. And I auditioned by cutting a couple projects. They hired me full time. And that was the beginning of, oh my gosh, all that time editing music and working with those audio elements converts over to and informs editing picture and sound together to make a really compelling new thing, which is really what creative advertising and marketing is when it comes to the world of entertainment. And that brings me into entertainment marketing. I've been in it for a couple of decades. It's gone by in a blink because it's a blast. But that's my origin story, if you will.
Well, and from, the Department of Small World, you're in California, I'm in Florida, but we're both from the Midwest. And I went to Purdue, you went to Indiana. So we're kind of strong Indiana roots.
I dated a girlfriend from Purdue for a while, so I hold them dear in my heart. I never had a big rivalry with them or anything. And when they're playing against another team like an Ohio State or whomever, I'm rooting for Purdue. I'm like, yep. You guys got it. And they beat Michigan State, I think, this year,
yep,
which was huge. And that's what I love. I was like, there are a lot of people that are like, no, you can't ever root for Purdue because you went to Indiana University. And I was like, we can rise above that one and think It's all Indiana, right?
Well, being born and raised in the Chicago area, I also did not necessarily get into the Purdue-Indiana rivalry. And growing up, I actually was a big Indiana basketball fan. Loved Steve Alford and watched those Bobby Knight teams. So yeah,
I was there on campus when they won that national title in 1987.
Very nice.
I believe the last time they won a title, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. They've had a couple of struggles the last decade or so.
Yeah.
When I look at your entry into the industry, looking at a couple different bios, it seems like you were always interested in the advertising side of things. I mean, that clearly started, back in your early days. But did you know that you wanted to be in advertising, or was it just one of those things that you fell into and on one day you said, "Hey, I guess I'm in advertising"?
Tough question. I'm not going to say great question because I try not to say that. Tough question in the regard that I don't know if I fully thought that through or reflected on it. But in answer to that question, I did always say to my friends, you got to check out this new song, or wouldn't it be awesome if an ad did this? These are two things, and they got tired of it. Like, okay, stop telling me about the new music and stop telling me what an ad should do.
Right.
And I'd still do that. I still will say to my wife, Samantha, that would have been a more effective promo or more effective ad, a more effective campaign, a more effective spokesperson, a more effective fill in the blank right? And that's producing, which is a really good thing to understand. What is producing entertainment content or an advertisement?
Mm-hmm.
And so I seem to gravitate toward it. And I think it is because it's a digestible, easy to process and maybe rewrite or overhaul or refine or assemble form of storytelling. It's short form storytelling. And I find that to be what's turned out to be our most common form of storytelling, thanks to social media, is short form storytelling, not long form.
Right.
So I think I was always drawn toward it, but I hadn't identified that. I just really enjoyed a good ad and I really got frustrated by a bad ad. And I love music.
Well, so I was are you able to watch things like that objectively, or are you always looking at it through the lens of what could be better or this was good?
I'm able to switch in and out of those gears, much like you would a vehicle, depending on the terrain or the speed you were going. I am able to shift in and out of those gears. And a lot of times I like to turn off that analytical side or that side that evaluates and has an eye of scrutiny, and really let something just wash over me. Because otherwise, movies can be an unfortunate experience because you're trying to analyze everything, and second guessing plot twists, character motivation, and things like that doesn't make for a fun. You don't want to be next to somebody who goes, "Oh, I figured this out already, and here's what's going to happen," or "I call BS on that because blank, blank, blank." I'd rather not be that guy that ruins a movie experience for somebody else, including myself. Right. So yeah, I'm good at actually I'll cry at a good Hallmark ad. I'll break down if it's really well crafted, like the dog commercials or the people in need commercials or the really desolate moments where someone's able to help another individual and it really comes across as genuine, which that's what I think great advertising can do, is move you emotionally because it's got a genuine believability about it. Right. So I'm a fan of advertising as much as I craft it.
Good. So prior to your time at Fox, you spent 2 decades with a couple of top agencies along, with some time at New Line Cinema. What sticks out about that time in your career? Were there any memorable stories or projects that you remember?
Yes, we could fill the rest of the podcast with an answer to the question, what was it like working for 4 different agencies and a movie studio? And the answer is, let's say, twofold. There were a number of great lessons and experiences relating to certain pieces of entertainment that had to be marketed. And there were also personnel management and leadership lessons, more so, as in, I remember specifically starting at my first agency, I remember hanging up a phone and saying aloud, maybe to myself, I will never speak to my vendor like that. And I remember being an editor in the edit chair saying, I will never speak to an editor like that when I become a producer. And when I run a department, I will never talk to my staff like that. And a lot of times it was, I will never talk or speak to. And I, to this day, that's a thing. When I got the New Line, I was like, wow, I will never speak to my coworkers the way my boss just spoke to somebody in front of me. And so I think the biggest lessons on the personnel / management leadership side were tone, demeanor, and language skills. And really don't just get up and do a rah-rah speech at a holiday party and say, we're about respect and inclusion and being equal and valuing everybody. Actually go off and value everybody day in and day out, and don't speak down to anybody, and don't show disregard or have an incivility, which I think is significant, because I came into the industry when it was about to begin its transformation. And that transformation was going to go from bad behavior to better behavior, because there are a lot of executives that just did whatever they wanted and treated their vendors like they were there to do their beck and do all their bidding, so to speak, versus, hey, you're my creative partner on this. We are in this together, trying to come up with how the best way to market this show or this movie. How can we work together on this? And really, really working with them versus figure it out. And then when they don't get it right, getting mad at them. Like, well, you could have helped them. So on the personnel side, leadership side, those are my most valuable lessons. Was how can I be a better manager or leader of a group of people based on my experiences? And good job, good boss, bad boss, always something to be learned, right? Any experience, even you're like, I didn't love New Line. I didn't love it there, fair to say, but I learned a ton, and I worked with that information. I'm informed by those learnings every day in my current role. On the project side, which is going to connect to leadership, actually, I learned to trust your instincts, trust your informed, educated, experienced instincts when it comes to how to bring something to market. Meaning, testing might give you some feedback, your coworkers might have some feedback, your research team's going to have feedback, the show producers, the actors, the leads, the heads of development, the presidents of marketing and worldwide marketing and distribution, and owners of the company and CEOs, they're all going to have an opinion about what's the best way to market it.
Sure.
But I remember interviewing with somebody or having a discussion with somebody, and we talked about, who do we work for? And when you're working on any one project, you work for that show, you work for that movie, you work for that new series, you work for that property. You don't work for the producers, you don't work for the company that's paying you. You really work for that property and that series or that movie. So if you think of it that way, and I do, what's best for that property? This is my client. The new movie called Cabin in the Woods, or the new show called Monarch, or the new whatever, fill in the blank. What's best for it? What represents it in the best light that's most compelling, most attractive to a possible viewer? That's what we should do. If that means we don't feature the lead in every piece of key art, even though the lead would like to be in every piece of key art, and they'll make that known, and their agent and their publicist and their manager and their attorney will tell you repeatedly, he or she should be dead center of the key art. There shouldn't be so many other people around them. They should be bigger, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yes, but what might be best for the campaign is to show a few more people, or to show a scenario where it's, wow, I didn't realize there's that big epic spectacle or whatever. So the learnings on the project side or the content side and bringing it to market were fight to do what's best for the show. You don't always win that fight. And you'll know when you see the billboard and it's that one lead and you're like, there are other people in that show. That's when you didn't win the fight. But I think really, and I'm trusting those instincts. There's a great example on a horror film called Final Destination 3, where I was given the title at New Line because no one else wanted to work on it.
Okay.
And I was told specifically, we want no mention of the first two movies, Final Destinations 1 and 2. It's a third installment of a tired franchise. So let's just release it. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a franchise that did really well. People love it. So I'm not going to listen to that advice. I'm going to go do what I think is best for this movie. And I'm going to make a teaser trailer with a specific editor named Josh Piha, who worked at Motion at the time, and a producer named Brian Hamrick. And I said, hey, we got to mention the first two somehow. We put together a teaser that said, You can escape death once, footage from the first one. You can cheat death twice, footage from the second one. But sooner or later, death will find you. Third movie, third trailer plays, huge campaign. When I showed it internally, and it was really well crafted, the heads of worldwide and domestic marketing go, "Oh my God, play that again." And it played. And then they said, "We want to mention the first two movies in everything." And suddenly they did a 180 and they want to mention the first two. Like, yeah, no kidding. You want to mention the first two. They're huge. There's a huge fan base for this movie franchise. And they've subsequently made 4, 5, maybe even 6. I don't remember if they've done 6 yet or not, but it's gone on to make people a lot of money. And it was because I didn't necessarily listen to people who weren't paying attention to what would be the best way to bring it to market. That doesn't mean they couldn't have given me better advice. They've given me plenty of great advice on other campaigns, but sometimes you got to trust that informed instinct that you have with you. Long answer, and I apologize, but that's what happens.
No, that was a great answer. And I especially like the part about the leadership stuff. In a previous job I had to interview all the interns, the potential interns. And one of the things that I just kept instilling in them is the professionalism side, the interpersonal communication side. I didn't care if they were a great editor or a great audio mixer or a great DP. All of those skills can be taught. Yep. But if you don't get past a conversation in respectfulness, it doesn't matter how talented you are. And so I'm glad to see that I wasn't completely off base on some of those things.
Yeah, you're not alone. You're not fighting the good fight alone, I tell you.
Good. So after all of that, you land at Fox as the Senior VP of On-Air Promotion, where you help launch a number of big titles, including 24, Live Another Day, Empire, Gotham, Grease Live, The Return of the X-Files, just to name a couple. How did you find your way over to Fox?
That's really interesting because I was a theatrical marketing guy up until I took the job at Fox. I had television marketing experience, but I was in the world of theatrical marketing. And it wasn't I'm better than you, I do theatrical. This was the world I found myself in. And that's the world I stayed in for a long period of time. And one day I got a phone call from one of my clients, because I also did some television. And one of my clients at Fox called me and said, "Hey man, I just want to let you know that I'm leaving Fox." And my inner monologue was, "Oh, he's going to ask me for referrals. Let me start thinking about people I know at other networks. I know a bunch of people at ABC and NBC and CBS. Maybe they want the job or whatever." This is back in 2013. And he said, "So I was going to put your name in." And I short-circuited thinking, wasn't ready for me to be the referral. Okay, I guess you can put my name in for it, but it's a TV job. I don't know that world. I don't know TV that well. I can make advertising for it, but I don't know the inner workings of a network. So I interviewed, and I always tell people, take the interview, even if you don't think you want that job. Take the interview, go through the interview practice, hone those skills, go in there and be yourself and practice being comfortable in discomfort, because sometimes people get anxious in interviews. Everybody does. It's normal. Right. And so I took the interview and I met with HR and a recruiter. You don't meet with the boss yet. You got to get through HR and recruiting. I got through them and I met with the COO, Joe Early, who to this day is the best boss I've ever had. And Joe Early, he now runs marketing over at Disney Plus. So he's no joke in this industry. And a tremendously compassionate and sensitive and thoughtful and creative leader. And I met with him and I loved talking to him. And then I thought about the job and they gave me the job offer and I declined it. He called me when he found out I said no, because I thought, I don't really understand television well enough to be the guy he needs me to be to run their promo department. I didn't want to not deliver for somebody. Right. Plus I knew theatrical really well and I loved where I worked. A place called AV Squad, incredible agency. And he called me and he said, "Are you leaving me at the altar?" And I said, "No, I'm just not the right fit for that." And I said, "You need a TV guy who understands your world." And he goes, "That's exactly what I don't need. I don't need another television guy over here who knows television. I need someone who sees it differently and brings a different perspective." And I go, "Well, that I can offer." So we talked about it for about a week. And on a Friday, I changed my mind and I accepted the job. And I do not regret that for a single second. And when I took the job, I, of course, walk into a job. I'm in the exact same office. I walked into the job running an on-air promo team thinking, okay, I'm just doing what I used to do for theatrical, but on a much bigger scale for more shows in a faster pipeline with a much bigger team. Let's see how that works. And I gave myself 1 year to see if I liked it or not, or if it resonated, instead of people going, how do you like your new job? I haven't decided yet. I don't want to make that decision in a hurry. I want to give it a second, like a relationship, right? And I fell in love with it and have been here I just crossed over my 8-year mark, which is the longest I've worked anywhere.
Wow.
And it's phenomenal. And I'm now as much of a television marketer as I was theatrical, fair enough. And while I would return to theatrical or both, streaming, which has both short and long form, I don't regret it for a second. And it's been the most amazing work experience. Although Joe Early left after 2 years, I still tell him, hey, man, how could you do that to me? Even though he knows I'm joking. And someday I'm sure we'll work together again. It's been an incredible journey. And it's all because my client thought to refer me for the job. I wasn't looking. And it's also because I reminded myself that I tell other people take the interview. So I took the interview, right?
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. And then you moved into your current role, which is the executive vice president, where you're involved with shows like 911, Last Man Standing, The Masked Singer, The Simpsons, which is one of my all-time favorites, of course, and a number of Gordon Ramsay shows. Talk about your current role. Like, what's a typical day for you?
It's crazy in a good way. And that is, we have any number of shows coming on air or coming to air, or the third tier would be, or down the road, in development to come to air down the road. Like what's going to be in the fall of next year? What's going to be in the mid-season a year from this January, right? What animation show are they making that will come out in summer 2023? And they're already working on it.
Wow.
So there are degrees of urgency and intensity that come with certain shows. But you're going to be bringing to market dramas, comedies, alternative, live events, specials, and you're going to do so in ways that are tried and true, as in 30-second spot that's going to go on our air. That's not going to change tomorrow and be at 35 seconds. It's going to be 30 seconds.
Right.
But you're also going to come up with other ways to bring it to market that are not conventional or expected. They are going to be different or attention grabbing or something that's louder and that stands out because it's an incredibly crowded marketplace now, more so now than ever. So the typical day is looking at a lot of different pieces of creative because I oversee 4 different cylinders in one big creative advertising engine: audiovisual, multi-platform, which is for anything off air and social, print or viz, which is design, print, custom assets for outdoor, and then the operations team that holds all that together. And we could do anything from trailer, TV spot, promo, billboard, key art, magazine ad, anything for social. It could be a meme, it could be a custom clip, it could be a filter, it could be a behind the scenes first look video, it could be a music video that we're helping put together. We also could be doing a trailer that's a rah piece internally to let everybody know, hey, great year. And here's a sizzle that shows you all the amazing things you helped bring to market this year. We were number 1 again in the fall. We have huge ratings when it comes to this show, this show, this show. We have a lot of great success off of our air because we also own Tubi, which is an AVOD, an advertising video on demand, non-subscription streamer. And we work with them, helping them bring certain movies or series to market on their platform. And some of those also air on our platform. We are on our channel. We also bought TMZ. We also own Bento Box. We own Global Ramsey, Studio Ramsey Global, that is responsible for all of Gordon Ramsay's shows. He's got a new competition series coming out this January called Next Level Chef. And so if you think about the ability to switch gears from drama to comedy to alternative, and then as if it's not enough to have drama in front of the camera, there is drama behind the camera where you can't get that talent because they're not available for the next 18 days because they're shooting a movie in Wyoming or in Canada or in London. And you need them to say a couple things to go in this piece that's going to go on air or off air. Or there is a logistical issue with the show. They're recasting somebody, or there are creative challenges, or there are deadlines that change, like, hey, that show that was going to come out at the end of January, it's moving up to the middle of January. Oh, we better hurry and get that special shoot put together because an ad's got to play inside a football game over the holidays to let people know this show comes out in the middle of January.
Right.
So there are logistical challenges, there are talent challenges. And that's why I encourage the team to really collaborate as best they can with everybody they work with, because we don't need to add to the drama. There'll be plenty built into the narrative, and we must always be great partners. And we try to do that in every turn. So the typical day is really energizing because there is any number of creative assignments, endeavors, approvals, ideas, pieces of campaigns. And then underneath that or behind that are personnel challenges that you cannot avoid.
Right.
So-and-so feels as though somebody else went rogue on something. So-and-so feels like they weren't included and they should have been. In many cases, that's probably true. The other person might just have been busy, forgetful, not that mindful in that moment. And it's really trying to make sure that even though we have those differences, we come together and rise above that and say, hey, no one's intentionally keeping anybody out of the loop, and working above and past those things. And then making sure the team knows, hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I happen to be in the office today, but I could be at home, right?
Right.
And letting them know you're remote. You've been busting your backsides remotely for months now. So let's take a moment to enjoy your holidays, let you know you're appreciated, and making sure that the team members know that they're cared for, because they are, right?
Right. And so I certainly don't want you to mention any titles, but I'm sure you're given shows and you watch and you think, what am I supposed to do with this? It might be easier to do what you do for the great shows, but how difficult is it for you to do what you do for some of the duds?
I can definitely do that. I can speak of titles outside of Vox easily. And it's funny, whether the show is good or bad, there's work to be done, right? You have to make it look good in whatever form you represent it.
Yep.
And if it's not a great show, that's where the real craft of manipulating and, dare I say, lying to people to say it's the best thing since sliced bread or the wheel, when that might not be true. But it does make it easier when you see something and it resonates and it feels good and it's a great experience and you get the tone and the show gets itself and understands what it is and the reason it exists. And I think that's a great question to ask. What is it about this show or movie that is beneficial for the viewer, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to love this competition and they're going to root for these people to overcome their shortcomings and rise above and win and become the next whatever, whether it's a singing show or a cooking competition, or when they watch this drama, they're going to ask themselves, how far would I go to save my kid if my kid were jeopardized or threatened? Would I be willing to break the law to this degree? Very Breaking Bad or very Cleaning Lady, new show coming out. So when they're great, they're really fun to work on because you can sink your teeth into something you can connect with and believe in. When they're not as great, which happens more often than you care to admit, we find ways to represent it as best as possible. What's this show in its best form? And I once had a writer speak to one of my classes and he said, he doesn't write what the show is, he writes what the show wants to be. Oh. And so when he writes his scripts for his trailers or TV spots, he writes it in its best form, which is just a simple way of elevating it, right?
Yeah.
And so we know we're going to get challenging shows. And sometimes the challenge isn't necessarily the final product or the content of the show or the concept of the show. It's the production schedule of the show. Like they're shooting it so close to its air date that we don't have as much time with the materials to start to formulate the best way to craft it together. You get a movie and you're working with it for a year, you're working on your trailer for 3 months, you can really make that trailer great.
Right.
You get a show that comes out in 6 weeks or 3 months, you have a month to do your trailer or less, and it's going to be your quote best representation of this show that's still shooting. They don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So the challenge with those more difficult duds, as you said in your document, which I thought was hilarious because some are duds, is to try to get as much time with the material as you can. And if you can't, then can we do a special shoot? Can we do a teaser? Can we come up with something that's more high concept or that's driven by an idea or a graphics treatment or some sound design or raising the question or using Sarandon and Atkins and the last names and the show title to raise awareness and get people kind of curious, what is that? There are other ways to represent a show when the show doesn't exist in its full form or best form yet. And that's the other challenge. It's never the same tactic or formula for any one property. It's always a nuanced, subtle, different approach for each campaign, which is important to know.
Yes. And so I promise that's the only negative question I'm gonna ask here, but let's balance it with the positive. So what's the best thing about your job?
The best thing about creative advertising is when you roll a great piece of creative, when you roll a great reel or a great promo or a great trailer or a great radio spot or a great TV spot or a great social asset, or usually it's audio visual, right? It's usually it's AV related.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it and feel it in a room, whether it's on a Zoom or in person. You can tell when a piece of a campaign connects with a group of people on a big scale. And it is such a rush, or such an invigorating feeling, or such a satisfying and fulfilling experience to see many people's hard work. It's not just my hard work. As a matter of fact, more people working hard on it, right?
Right.
Editors, producers, writers, graphics designers, people pulling sound design, people pulling music, the music team, Fox Entertainment Music, everybody coming together, the finishing team, putting it through the color correction and the mix and getting everything dialed in and polished. To see that play and to get huge response from people in a positive way because they connected with the materials, they thought they were really strong. That is incredibly satisfying. And more times than not, I would be sitting at my desk just working away on the next thing, and my phone rings and someone says, Dana wants you to come upstairs and roll those 3 trailers for her entire development team. So Dana, and now we have Charlie Collier, who runs the network, very similar in the fact that, hey man, when you show us, the development team or the CEO, the show in promo form or trailer form, and it looks and feels great, that fires up the development team going, oh, we're onto something. This can be brought to market. It's almost like making a trailer for something you're trying to finance, and you see it in trailer form and you go, wow, that looks great. How much money do you need to finish your movie, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a really satisfying experience, to roll it up and see that AV moves the needle, and not just gets people to want to work, see the show, gets people fired up that are working on the show. And we've actually played trailers where the head of development, Michael Thorne, has said, I'm so glad to see this. It looks great in trailer form. We haven't seen a cut of the first episode yet, but it's looking great. Thanks for showing it to me, because the show's still working on the show and we're busy working on the marketing. So it's very satisfying, and great creative can change people's life experience. Storytelling is incredibly profound and important to our culture for survival, for connection, for rallying around common values, for sense of identity and purpose and maybe worth. So storytelling is an incredibly important part of our culture, and we're just representing as best we can stories we think that matter and that will, as Charlie says, pierce popular culture and make a difference. Hopefully a positive difference, right? We don't want to put stuff out that isn't good for the world. We want to create things that people benefit from by watching, whether it takes them out of their lives and gives them a moment of just sensational entertainment to not be connected into something more intense, or it's a great drama because they love a good drama, or they needed a laugh, or they needed to connect with somebody, or they wanted to learn how to cook a dish better, whatever. We can make people's lives better.
Listening to you speak, it seems like every day is kind of a dead out sprint and an adrenaline rush. I mean, is it that fast paced? And I mean, are you able to just kind of catch your breath sometimes, or is it literally like a dead sprint from the minute you get into the office till the minute you leave?
Different perspectives from different team members, I'm sure. And like, we're going into a long weekend before the holiday break, and we have all these affiliates that carry our signal. And over the holidays, they like to take some time off, and they should. They bust their butts all year long. So they need their promo load, or the commercials we're going to give them for our shows, they need those earlier this time of year so they can program them and schedule them, and then they can take some time off. So we got to deliver our spots earlier. So we have a team that comes in. They were here at 7 a.m. this morning when I was walking in. At finishers, room producers, colorists, mixers, they're all here. And so they're going to grind it out over the weekend. They're going to be sprinting nonstop. For me, it's sometimes there's crazy rush, and sometimes there's a bit of a, hey, I can sit down and focus on creative and really look at this piece and give some pointed feedback that's beneficial, that helps elevate it. It varies depending on time of year, but it seems as though we're relatively busy most of the time. And a gentleman who used to work here, his name's Tommy, he runs a company called Pool Party Creative as an agency. He had worked on the theatrical, so he used to be president of marketing at Sony Pictures worldwide. So big role. And he was here running the creative team for a good period of time. And he was working with us because he oversaw us. And he said he's never seen the caliber of work that we generated on such a fast timeline in such a consistent fashion. He goes, I've never seen this good of work made this fast, made consistently. And I said, what other choice do we have? Do we get to say to the shows, sorry, you don't get to release when you want to, when Dan has scheduled you to release because we're not ready? No.
Right.
Do we get to say, you are going to release it on that day, but here's a crappy campaign? No, because we like to keep our jobs. So we've just learned to adapt and move with this incredible breakneck pace. And I credit technology with making it happen this fast, because it used to be you'd cut a trailer and you'd have to render your graphics and you could step out of the edit bay for hours while it built itself and you output it and you shipped it over on a tape to the client and you waited for hours for them to watch it. Nowadays, they can be watching your edit bay while you're working and giving you notes on the fly because they're fibering directly into your edit bay. Instantaneous. Hey, get me those changes right away. I got to show them first thing in the morning. And it's okay. It is high energy. It's not draining in any way. It's invigorating. Are there moments of frustration? Of course, every relationship has moments of frustration, but they are far outweighed by the moments of invigoration and fulfillment and joy and challenge and the satisfaction that comes with solving problems. Because creative, a lot of people will say great creative is really good problem solving. And so we look at it as today, what challenges will we be solving together, right?
Nice. So in addition to all of this, you also teach. A colleague of mine took your virtual class, and when she told us all about it, I immediately reached out to her to ask if she would make an introduction and ask if you'd be on the podcast. So thank you, Megan, for that. Tell us about the classes that you teach and why you do it.
Well, my mom was a teacher, so I grew up in a household where, whether I was told this overtly or I just learned it, you appreciated instruction from someone who might have some point of view that mattered. So I grew up appreciating a teacher's point of view because I heard stories every day, right? From my mom coming home from school. And then interestingly, I graduate from graduate school in 95. I get into the industry in 96 and I start doing trailers. And at the tail end of 2008, one of my favorite instructors from Art Center, Francine, passed away. And I was at her service in Hollywood. And she was a heavy hitter in the industry. And she was an incredible instructor, very hard on us. I am not nearly as hard on my students. I should be harder on my students. And I was at that service, and a gentleman there who's a classmate from earlier was running a film program at Long Beach City College. And we were chatting, like you do at a service when you have a moment, say, oh my God, Francine, what a great, teacher. And I'm sad that she's gone. All the things that we were really feeling and expressing. And it was an amazing group of people that gathered in her honor. And he said, hey, I'm running the film program at Long Beach City College. Would you ever want to come down and teach a course? And I said, sure, I would love to. I've always wondered in the back of my mind, would my knowledge or my experience be of benefit to others? And if so, I benefited from great instructors or people who cared enough to tell me what they knew. Maybe I could pay that forward and do that if my schedule allowed it. And it did. I was able to work it out to where, because I was freelancing, and I could work it out where I could go down and teach 3 or 4 times a week, 20 hours worth of classes. It was a ton of work. And it was a drive to Long Beach from Sherman Oaks, which is not a short drive. But it was such a fulfilling experience, from a classroom of 10 students in a very intimate, hey, we're doing film production together, to an editing class of 30 students, to a Film 1 lecture class of 143 students. So I had a range of experience, and you got to organize yourself to go lead and inform and help offer insightful feedback or insightful information to students. And that led to being recruited to teach at Santa Monica College. And then I was giving a tour to some members of Promax that had moved over to UCLA. And I just arranged to have their students come over and take a tour of the Fox lot. And I was just giving the tour. Oh, this is where they did this, and this is what they do here. And I don't know what that building's about. And one of those students, Rachel, said, hey, would you ever want to teach at UCLA? Let me introduce you to somebody at UCLA Extension. So sure, I teach already for Santa Monica College once a year. And so I taught for UCLA last fall, and apparently it went well. They were foolish enough to ask me to do it. And they're foolish enough to ask me back. And it's a global marketing class called Entertainment Marketing Strategies for a Global Marketplace, which sounds very lofty and important. And that challenged me to really break down even further what it is we do and how it fits into a much bigger picture. Like creative advertising is part of a bigger marketing campaign that involves publicity and talk shows and press releases and talent relations and events and stunt marketing and installations and Comic-Cons and festivals and junkets and all sorts of other forms of marketing that are just part, and creative advertising is just part of that. So in answer to your question, I valued the good teachers I had. I didn't love the ones that weren't great, but I valued the good ones, and I wanted to kind of pay that forward. You definitely don't teach for the money. I'm going to be clear about that. I have a full-time job. That's partly for the money, right? But the teaching is not for the money. It is definitely for the joy of having that learning experience together. And I learn as much, and I'm as invigorated by the students as I am by the job and by the advertising and by the entertainment world. So it is something that also keeps me grounded and connected to the way the next generation are viewing the things we're doing and saying, and they will call BS on anything quickly, which is great. You don't want to ever come across as insincere or disconnected. So I love it. I love teaching. It's incredibly time consuming and it disrupts my schedule beyond. My wife is so understanding because we have 2 young children, but she's like, you love teaching. Let's find a way to make it where you can keep doing it no matter what. So that's awesome, right?
That is cool. That's very cool. So last question here is the obligatory one. What advice would you give to someone wanting to follow your path in the industry?
I ask this question anytime I have a guest speaker or an interviewee, and I give a similar answer. The advice I have for people wanting to get into entertainment advertising, whether they want to get into editing, producing, directing voiceover, overseeing finishes and mixes, doing art direction, crafting the key art, managing, being a project manager and overseeing the chaos of these things, all these things moving through the pipeline at these different rates. I think internships are an incredible point of access into our world. Fox always takes interns across the entire portfolio, right? Fox Sports, Fox Entertainment, the stations group, corporate. And so internship, number one answer is if you can do an internship or more than one. I can't say how many people I know that found their way into their role or the world in which their role is to be found through an internship doorway. And the second thing that I think is great is if an internship is not something that's available, but there's a place you really want to work or an industry you really want to get into or an aspect of the industry, like let's say you wanted to get into editing, you would go to trailer houses and you'd say, hey, anything I could do to get in there. Can I be an assistant to somebody? Can I be a runner? Can I be a PA? I just want to be inside the building and watch how you make this magic come to fruition. A lot of times that enthusiasm in the discussion catches people's attention in a positive way. Wow, who doesn't want an enthusiastic team member fired up about advertising or about marketing? And so a lot of times you want to bring people over that are enthusiastic. I don't want to your point earlier, you could have all the experience in the world. If you don't have enthusiasm and passion and the ability to speak respectfully to your peers, no, thank you, right? We really need that integrity and enthusiasm. And then the other thing is to identify people in the exact role that you want and try to actually connect with them and say, okay, you are one of the top designers. You're one of the top voiceover artists. This is a good one. People all the time are like, oh, I want to get into voiceover. Okay. You actually have to do some work to get into that world. You can't just say that and suddenly they start meeting down your door saying, because you want this, you get it. Right. You have to audition. You have to build a reel. You have to put together a demo. But what if you could get a hold of a Jim Tasker or a Scott Rummel or a Phil Terrence or a fill in the blank Will Lyman or whatever, men and women, and say, hey, how'd you get into that? And what demo did you put together? And actually understand what demo, reel, resume could you send that would get someone's attention? And I do this great thing with students. I take all these resumes I have in a folder. I still have it right across my office. I take all these resumes that I've received over the many years I've been here, and I lay them out on a huge table. And I say, step back with me. Don't touch them. You can't touch any of these, but you can see all of them face value. Which one do you want to read? And they look at them and they immediately gravitate toward the ones that don't look like every other resume, right? You're in a world of entertainment marketing where the thing you're making has to stand out against other people making really awesome things too. So how do you stand out? How do you cut through? How do you be loud? How do you be attention grabbing? How do you be unexpected, but still accessible? It can't be repelling, like it's so crazy I can't even read it. And so that exercise is a great practice to identify what it is that could best represent you to people who have no idea who you are. And everybody wants the job you're trying to get. So how can you represent yourself in a way to that possible future employer that stands out and that shows that you understand marketing on a fundamental level by marketing yourself in an unusual and eye-catching fashion, right? Like your resume should not look like everybody else's because you're in the marketing, entertainment marketing industry. It should look interesting or entertaining or stand out or be easy to read or colorful or lively or whatever word makes this point, right? And I think that's a good exercise. So internships, any other way in, PA, assistant, and then really identifying how to represent yourself in a fashion that cuts through and stands above and out from everybody else.
Excellent. Excellent advice. So Scott, this was awesome. I know how busy you are. I really appreciate you making time to visit with me today. Thanks for being on the Film Florida podcast.
I'm excited. It's my first podcast. I'm so excited to be a part of a podcast. I have a microphone that's meant for podcasts. So this is great. No, thank you so much for taking the time and for the very thoughtful questions. And I'm really glad that Megan connected us. That's great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Film Florida podcast. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org or visit our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. If you like what you hear on the podcast, please consider going to our website and donating $20.22 for our 2022 fundraising campaign. Check out the Film Florida merchandise at filmflorida.creator-spring.com. And please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.